Howdy, everybody. Happy end of the middle of the week day here on Wednesday. This
Hey,
is our
hey.
yeah, this is our eighth episode on this platform thinking, platform design podcast. Been talking to a lot of great guests. Really excited today to have Anton with us. Anton, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody? Give people a little idea what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Jabe, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be talking again. It's been a couple of years since we
Yeah,
last met in person.
yeah.
And thrilled to be here. I'm located in Israel. I've been in the industry for the last 23 years, since the year 2000, and basically I'm a consultant and an instructor in the DevOps software delivery field. I'm the CEO of a consulting company called Otomato or Otomato. Okay, I say Otomato, you say Otomato. And also now I'm a CTO at this new thing that we're building that we're calling Stage Central. It's a very early stage, but it's a central thing.
Cool.
Stage Central.
What are you guys doing at CH Central?
I'll touch upon that a bit later.
Mm.
So, but in general, it's around platform engineering.
Cool.
Not surprisingly, right?
Cool. Well, since this is the platform thinking, platform design, platform engineering podcast, when I talk to people, everybody kind of has a subtly different definition of platform. It seems like to be, lots of different ways of looking at it. And just for the audience and me, like, how would you like to think about it today during the conversation? Like, how should we think of a platform?
I think a platform is basically a competitive advantage. Okay, so simply put, of course, if it's your platform, because if it's the platform that everybody else is using, it's not a competitive advantage, right? This is more like more of a sales pitch. But seriously, a platform, I like simple definitions. So basically, a platform is a system that you can build and run upon, right? So basically, just that. So it's build and run. Okay, so you could. I've been listening, by the way, to some of the episodes of your great show. And I've noticed there's a lot of comparisons, like, is it a product? What are products? What are platforms? How is platform different from a product or a service? So yeah, I guess you could say it is a product, but again, it's a product that you can build upon.
Cool. And you had this other one that I haven't heard yet. I think I would generally agree with it. It has to be like the platform in many ways, right now at least, has to be differentiated in some way. Like almost like it's your platform, not everyone's platform. So something that everybody has access to, maybe not what you think of as a platform. Am I close to what you were thinking?
Well, no, basically, something that everybody has access to is also a platform. It's just, again, it's not a competitive advantage. So that's why we're talking so much about internal platforms now in this whole buzz called platform engineering. So it's basically not just about building platforms. There are all kinds of platforms, and I like, many things could be called platforms, but specifically in IT, the platform engineering buzz is about creating that internal platform. Basically, because we had this platform as a service buzz about 5-8 years ago, right? With the Heroku being in the spotlight, and then Google App Engine and Elastic Beanstalk trying to replicate that success. But then there was this huge promise, and where are all these platforms now? Like, they were wonderful, but that was an approach that didn't really scale, Because the problem with those generic platforms is that once you start building something fairly complex on top of them, the whole thing starts cracking at the seams. Because you have to put those, like, what do you call them, enabling constraints in the platform. But if they're constraints, they're generic constraints, the moment you started building something that's not that generic, something that's special, something that provides the differentiating value for your customers, you suddenly find yourself fighting against the platform, and that's not a place anybody wants to be.
Yeah. I mean, I have said this to people a bunch recently. Everybody wants the Heroku experience. They don't necessarily want Heroku. They want that like ability to kind of like instantiate the like a heavily opinionated platform, but they want it to be their opinions, not someone else's opinions. Not like a generic set of opinions. They want their own internal. Almost like, yeah, I think of it frequently as kind of like verticalized. Like banks would often have very specific things that they would need in their platform that may not make sense in a retail place, or wouldn't necessarily make any sense if you were serving cat pictures. Like there's just different kind of like needs and constraints for different firms, and so you're getting this kind of, as you said, like this need to develop not just on platforms, but to understand how to develop and manage a platform itself. Yeah,
exactly. I want the platform developer to cater to my needs, not to everybody else's needs. Because that's basically the issue with the cloud providers. Because what I say is basically right. You need to build an internal platform, but that only starts making sense at a certain scale. If you're a small startup, the cloud provider is all the platform that you'll ever need, right? Because you have all the services there, and that's enough for you to scale until you get to a certain size, where suddenly you start realizing that the cloud provider doesn't give you what you need at those corner cases.
Yep.
And those corner cases start mattering.
Yep.
Because suddenly you're competing against the big guys, and you're much more noticeable, because when you're small, it's easier to compete.
Yep.
Nobody notices you until you become really, really big. And once you're big, you need to fire all the guns, and then suddenly the platform becomes that important differentiator, that competitive advantage that you want to have full influence upon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, so like I think there's a couple interesting threads. Like one of the things I've been saying to people, or trying to convince people of recently, is this thing where it's like one of the things I think is confusing about the platform conversation right now is there used to be like platform as a service. There used to be, software as a service, SaaS, PaaS. Like there was a conversation about what that meant, blah, blah, blah. And in general, what I think I see a lot right now in the marketplace is that there's no one-stop shop that makes sense for everybody, where all the components are already pre-configured in a way that people like them. So really, like, you can outsource all of your operations to somebody if you're using something like Heroku, because you're not operating anything other than a very thin layer of application on top. But nowadays, people have this illusion that they've outsourced their operations to people, but they're building all this software to configure all these SaaS solutions and primitives from different providers and observability platforms. I mean, this becomes a significant piece of software that needs to be operated above these things that, in theory, you're paying someone else to operate, right? So, I mean, I think this is like one of the things that I wonder about when I kind of poke around in platform world right now. Seems to be like a lot of focus on developer productivity, developer, reducing cognitive load for developers, treating developers as the primary consumer of a platform, like the people who need to the most focus on the platform. But it seems to me that like if we're building these significant pieces of software, like where is the conversation right now around operations? Like, how can we avoid having this like very strange conversation we're having right now about development platforms, development teams, blah blah blah, platform teams, etc. Not erase the ops out of the DevOps conversation. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Like, I don't know if you see this.
Totally. I see this happening, and like there are some voices of concern because the whole marketing around platform engineering in the last year has been like DevOps is dead. Right?
Yeah.
I think Humanitech started that buzz. So I understand their need to create those clickbait titles.
Yep.
But with all that, there is something to that, right? Because the discussion around developer productivity is really a very biased focus, right? And I see the ops folks voicing those concerns, like. So some of the folks that we've been talking about, building that internal developer platform or internal developer portal, and they were saying like, okay, we understand there are some benefits to the developers maybe, but in the end, it's us who are going to have to operate that thing, and we don't see enough benefits coming to us from this thing, right? Beside maybe certain well done from the developers or from the management in the end when we finally stand up this thing. And there is there's substantial effort in creating this stuff. So I think the focus here is definitely problematic, and it's definitely standing in the way of creating the platforms. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking, why don't we actually switch the focus a little bit and call those internal, delivery platforms?
Yeah, interesting. Yep.
Because then you put the focus on delivery, and that's the delivery of value. And then you say everybody who's involved in this value delivery game will, in the end, benefit from this. Because in the end, the operators do have a lot to benefit from these platforms. Yeah. Basically, the idea of the platforms originally, if you go back to the SRE book, is reducing toil. So we codify all those day-to-day routine tasks that operators don't really want to deal with. We codify and automate all of the ticket resolutions that the operators would have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and we make them part of the platform, and that would definitely benefit the operators. But operators don't really see this yet, maybe because of the discourse being so heavily biased towards the developer experience.
Yeah, I like it's one of the things I worry about with SRE. I don't know if worry about is the right thing. I don't worry about the SREs themselves, but in other organizations, they're like the Google SREs. I think understands this perfectly well. But in other organizations that I've talked to who have SREs, who are trying to understand, again, the weird one for me is we've got a DevOps team, we've got an SRE team, we've got a platform team, and I'm like, why are the, like, how do you differentiate that in your mind? Like, how do you know what the difference is? Like, seems like those people should be doing kind of the same type of stuff. So like, what do you think about that? Like, how can you think through it well? And so like, there's often this kind of like weird version of SRE is like incident management people, whereas operations people are infrastructure operations, not really software like there's some very strange dialogue about that. But in particular, SRE to me, when we talk about something like the platform as a product, right? part of the thing that I feel like, again, is missing in the conversation is understanding what reliability is to Google. Reliability is not like an add-on. And reliability is not simply there because it makes the operators' lives better, although it does. Reliability is there as a primary feature that the customers of Google care about, right? Like the whole point of reliability starts from these research at Google around keeping the page load time below a certain number of seconds, because over that number of seconds, people reload the page or they go away, and this either causes excess load on your system or you lose a customer. That's a feature of the application. It's not like some abstraction. It's not some way of saying like, we just want to be generally available. No, it's, when I say to people sometimes, you can tell that this is true, and this is a quality that people value, customers value from Google, because if your internet connection goes down at home, probably the first thing you type to make sure your internet connection is back up is google.com, because if google.com comes up, your internet connection's working, right? Like, so how do we have a better discussion around like the quality of having a platform that's operable, that is valuable to the end users, not just to the developers, and how that relates to operational excellence as well as reducing operational burden? Does that make sense as a framing? Like what do we need to, how do we get that point across to more people, I guess?
Yeah, well, I guess, it goes back to for me at least, to my definition of platform. Like the very simple definition, platform is a system that you can build and run upon. So right now the build upon is getting most of the focus, right? Yeah. But then there is the part that you run upon. Basically, I think where I see currently, the implementations of those developer portals lacking is understanding the user experience in general, right? There's a lot of talk, as we said, about developer experience. Now, developer experience is basically a subset of, the UX discipline, the user experience. A developer is just, a persona in the user experience view. But that's not enough, because the developer also has different personas when interacting with that platform, right? So there's the persona that wants to build something, and we'll talk about that a bit more, because that's a very special persona. And then there is the other persona that wants to run something. By the way, the operators are not different. The operators also want to keep evolving the platform, so the platform needs to be evolvable, right? And the operators, of course, need to be able to efficiently run the software that gets built by developers on that platform. So all of these personas need to be taken into account when building a reliable, usable platform that would get adoption. Because one of the largest problems with internal platforms, and that's from a market research that we've been conducting in the last half a year, is the adoption of these new systems.
Absolutely. And I think interestingly to me, like focus on DevEx, focus on developers, kind of a lack of people keep on doing this traditional 3-tier architecture metaphor in their brain, I think, where they're like, oh, this is the middleware, and the middleware is consumed by the top application development team. It's not consumed by the end users. But I think that's an illusion too. I think that's not actually a great metaphor for how the systems work together in the first place, and how the end users perceive quality and things like that. But I do think there's this weird, need to get people to think about their focus as that DevEx focus is primarily a day zero, day one focus, right? It's how do we get people on the platform? And to me, I say to people all the time, if you don't have an operable platform and you're highly successful with day one, isn't day two going to be like really painful? Like you get lots and lots of people onboarding onto something that's not operable, not supportable. Won't the people who show up early just tell everybody else in the business that thing doesn't work very well? It's not supported very well. I don't understand where my systems are going. They can't tell me where things are running. I mean, one of the kind of day two conversations I have with people a lot around platforms ends up being like, when there's an incident, who do I call? Do I call the app team? Do I call the platform team? How do I know what's happening? Like, there's a lot of questions about day two that focusing on DevEx is again, if you focus on DevEx, you could become massively successful, and then you do what? Without having thought through the day two stuff. So does that kind of resonate with you, or in your experience, do people need to spend more time thinking about that day two part of the platform?
Yeah, definitely. So you've built the platform, and let's say you've somehow convinced, tricked, seduced the developers to use it. Okay, and then then comes the maintenance stage, and not only the maintenance, because the maintenance isn't important. Yeah. The platform needs to be able to evolve, as we said.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing to understand, like that, the engineering platforms are different. They're not like, there are some parallels, like Shopify. Okay.
Yep.
So Shopify is basically also a platform you can build your shop upon. Mm-hmm. But again, a shop is something that's very much defined by the Shopify experience, right? So they're saying this is what you can do, this is what you can do. It's different in engineering, because the moment you define what you can and what you cannot do, you basically stifle the creativity. And one thing to understand about engineering, that engineering is a creative profession. So the engineering platform needs to be somewhere between that, right, platform that has all of those enabling constraints. But I think you were talking about, it has to be decomposable. I need to be able to tear off the rail guards in certain points and go creative, go build something new, or at least come to the platform developer and tell them, this is currently not enabling me to do what I need to do. Please make it so that I can cross the boundaries of the platform as we see it today.
Yeah.
So what was the question again?
No, it's just like again, like day two operations being like
so day two, and basically, so first of all, many folks are voicing that platform engineering is nothing new. We've been trying to build these internal platforms for a long time, and basically the big guys, the Googles and the Facebooks of the search, they've done this, and they've mostly succeeded with this because they have the capabilities and the force to do this. But many other companies have tried this, and they maybe have succeeded in an early stage, but then in the end they started failing with this because this evolution. Because first of all, I think many folks don't realize that it's a long game they're playing.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, what you're saying, you're okay. You want to deliver value. That's clear. Like as a platform team, you've built a platform team, you invested, and you want to see value in the short run. But a platform is a long-term investment.
Yeah.
So basically, you need to continue maintaining that, and you need to continue evolving that. And then that's where it starts breaking up, because the folks who originally built the platform, they leave the company. We know what the work market looks today. Like people don't stay at the same place for too long.
Yep.
And then when you arrive at a new place and you suddenly see a system that you haven't built, you have a very low motivation of supporting that system.
Yep.
That's why, by the way, mentioning Backstage, which is very interesting specifically for us at Stage Central today, because we're building upon that. That's why we see many folks who have built internal portals before that, from scratch, homegrown stuff. They at a certain point, they make the hard decision to throw that away, or maybe integrate it somehow into something based on the community effort, which is Backstage.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I have two things. Like, one is, so like, to me, the FANG, the traditional, like, we got the network, the Netflix, we got the Facebooks, we've got the, Googles, people who have developed significant kind of internal platforms. One of the things I try to say to people sometimes, is I don't think that was accidental that they all kind of randomly came up with it roughly at the same time. I think what happens in a lot of organizations is you reach a critical phase, a critical amount of complexity where you can't do it anymore. You can't sustain the level of complexity without having something that looks suspiciously like a platform. And if you look, each of these different companies has, and look at Amazon, they all have subtly different versions of solving for this thing, which is like, how are we going to deal with the fact that we've got like lots of different teams, all either application-based or feature-based or service-based? How are we going to get them all to use the same infrastructure? How can we get them to consume each other's services appropriately? Like, all these like the questions that they try to answer, and they come up with their own internal platforms. And so my suspicion is the reason why we're seeing this spread is not simply because people are mimicking Google, although I do think a lot of people do that as well. But I do think that some of the larger banks, some of the larger enterprises are reaching those same critical levels of complexity and interaction, massive amounts of mergers and acquisitions and things like this, and increasing the number of teams, the complexity of the systems. And the only way I think you can sustain that level of complexity is by creating these platforms. And so that to me leads me, to back to your point at the beginning. If you're being responsive to environmental pressures, if you're evolving because you're being responsive to environmental pressures, your context, your environment probably subtly different. Your platform probably looks somewhat different than other people. You have different patterns, different concerns, things like this. And so this skill for creating this software that allows for the management of complexity, the sharing of common concerns, things like this, something that we might call a platform, it is something that we need to develop in these firms that they don't really, entirely have right now. Am I wrong, or is that also you kind of like what you're seeing when you look around?
Yeah, basically, we're like how long? 14 years since 2009, when Patrick Dubois and Andrew Clay Sheffer started talking about agile infrastructure and coined the term DevOps.
Yep. And
there's been a lot of evolution in IT and in managing infrastructure since then. And on the other hand, the scale of information systems has grown exponentially, right? Yep. So we're now running on clouds. We have virtual infrastructures that are managed by APIs, and instead of managing like tens or dozens of servers as we used to 10 years ago, we're now suddenly managing hundreds of servers, or thousands of containers. So that's been growing, and that all started with Google's and Facebook's and Netflix's. But also the traditional IT organizations like banks and insurance companies, they also need to keep up, because first of all, the amount of information services that we expect from them has grown very much. Like, if now my bank can't provide me service over the internet, I wouldn't work with that bank. If my insurance company doesn't give me access to my data over the internet, why would I stay with that insurance company? So they suddenly have that new scale, right? And they need to keep up with that, because back in the days, you've built an information system, it has 1,000 users, and it stays at 1,000 users, and maybe, tomorrow I have 1,010. Okay, but today it could suddenly you find yourself having to scale from 1,000 to 10,000, and that's a totally different level of complexity.
Yep.
This requires totally different architectures.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, definitely. So with DevOps, we received all of those new tools to manage this complexity. Like, we started managing infrastructure as code, and we suddenly realized we need CI servers and those workflows that would allow us to bring the software to the production in a more reliable and in a speedier way, right?
Yep.
But it got very fragmented.
Yeah.
Because we were realizing each piece once at a time. And then, we now need CI/CD, so we'll add CI/CD. And we probably need to have a monitoring system, so we'll add a monitoring system.
Yeah.
Now, actually, that's totally fine, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned, that notion of one-stop shop.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been a lot of traditional IT shops have tried to sell us on this idea of, I'll give you a one-stop shop to manage all of your software delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And that has never worked in the end.
Yep.
Because all of these concerns are different concerns in the end.
Yep.
And it's very hard to create one platform that would specialize in all of these different concerns, different products. It's like that, restaurant which you go to and it says we have Chinese and Italian and also Turkish, and you most of the time you realize none of those dishes will be any good. You want specialization.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when you're a user of that platform, you want some integration between these different specialized branches, specialized systems that are there. And that's basically what building an internal platform entails.
Yeah.
Realizing that there will always be different concerns, there will always be specialization, right? And there were many mistakes in implementing DevOps where folks would say, okay, now everybody owns everything. Right. Developers are responsible for production now.
Yeah.
And that has never worked because, developers, first of all, they don't want that responsibility.
Yeah.
Okay. And forcing developers to wear, beepers hasn't really worked.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you just, the problem of cognitive load comes into play, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to overload your specialists because they stop being specialists, and then they're worth much less.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, I keep on. I have this suspicion about. I keep one of the things I've been telling people recently is everybody has a platform. It's just whether or not they've designed it or thought about it well. Like, if you're running anything like modern software, you have some way of deploying that software on a reasonably regular basis. There's some way of operating it in some fashion or another. If you can't operate it at all, you're dead in the water, right? Like, the problem is that a lot of those platforms are made up of not automation, but processes, not automation, but people, not software, but people, right? Or massive fragmentation of functionality without any thoughtful way of presenting an opinionated way of configuration, right? So it's kind of like, we offer all these, components to you. You figure out how to put it together. And to me, the answer to that is like, well, what if I don't? I mean, some people might want that, but what if I don't want that? What if I just want like a Heroku experience? I just want to type into the command line, give me my environment that has my basic services for authentication, data storage, computation, network configuration. That's what I want. I don't want to know too much else about how it works or what it does. That's not my job. That's not what I'm doing. I'm here to make yet another web page that allows people to do some functional thing. I don't want to know about all the rest of it. please just give that to me. So I think, to me, that also, like what you're talking about resonates with me as far as like going around and just looking around and being like, part of the problem we have is highly fragmented platforms inside of these organizations, because they didn't have a way of engineering or architecting or designing them as a cohesive whole. They just kind of did point-based solutions the whole time, I guess. So yeah. What do you so what, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
As you said, everybody has a platform already, whether you want it or not.
That's right.
You've got a platform.
That's right. Absolutely. In order to compete nowadays, you just have to. You can't not have one. It's just how painful is your platform. Like, platform by omission as opposed to commission. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, what's your thoughts on all this AI, agents, automated agents, things like this? Like, what should people be thinking about in relationship to platforms around, I don't know, ChatGPT, agent-based stuff? What are you? What's your ideas or thoughts on that?
Okay, so basically, with me and my partner Arthur, we've been talking a lot about how to build those internal platforms, internal delivery platforms. That's the term I like.
Yeah, I like that too.
For the long term, right? For the long game, not just for the sake of having a portal that nobody's using.
Yeah.
Right. And we're realizing that, first of all, the rules of the game are changing. So we do realize that coding as we know it today is going to change. Definitely, like any content creation is going to change because of what we're now seeing in the AI world. Now, basically, it doesn't say that we're not going to see any more coding. And I think the best parallel here, I've been playing music since I was a teenager. And, I remember when electronic music became popular, and there were synthesizers and sequencers and drum machines, and like the purist would say, oh, this is going to kill music, and everybody now can play music. They don't need to have any skill. They don't have don't need to have to know anything about music in order to make music. And that never happened, right?
That's right.
We just received totally new genres of music.
Yep.
We received new geniuses that found this new tool or these new tools and created things that we couldn't have thought about before that. Right? And we still have the traditional music, of course, and very talented musicians who also incorporate these new tools in their traditional music making.
Yeah.
So I think something of the kind is going to happen to software programming, software engineering. Definitely. We still don't know what it's going to look like. But definitely we just have new tools that are going to make us, first of all, probably more productive. But on the other hand, that will allow us to create products that we just even can't envision right now. Right?
Yep.
Now, when thinking about how this relates to platform building, I think it just, it intensifies the need that we currently see to be able to have visibility and observability into the delivery process. And that's, one of the very important parts of what a platform entails. With all the complexity, like the first thing that we want to build around our systems is that software catalog that shows us here are all of our components, here is who owns them, here are their priorities, and here is how they get delivered from idea to the customer, right? And now we have the autonomous agents and AI, and basically the idea of autonomous agent, for the folks who haven't looked into that yet, is basically we're creating those pipelines, workflows where AI is involved. So basically you create an end goal a certain task, like, I don't know, deploy a web service that does this, that, and that with like a very good definition of what the end goal is. And then you could also define some intermediary tasks.
Yeah.
And then AI would, iterate on that and achieve a result. And based on the result that it achieves along the way, it would go to the next step and to the next step until the end goal is achieved. Right? So basically it's automation, but it's an AI-powered automation. Now, what I see is we need much more visibility and observability. Like, I was thinking about this and said, probably all of the controls you would need in such a software development process, like one big red button that you can hit when you suddenly see that AI has gone all wrong and you need it to stop.
Yep. Interesting.
So something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think. Go ahead. Sorry. Keep going.
No, that's okay, because suddenly this becomes much less about developer experience. You don't care that much about the AI experience with the platform, but you basically care very much about how in the end there will be humans setting the priorities. Yeah. So the humans need to be able to understand what's the thing that AI is doing right now, and that becomes a very important feature of the platform.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like one of the things that it makes me think about is like, so there's this idea of kind of automated governance or modern governance. Different people call it kind of different things. But one of the things that I thought was most interesting about it is, so like, just for people at home, automated governance, modern governance is the idea of kind of automating compliance. Attestations in particular, like that certain things happened during the build process, the SDLC was followed, things like this. Software development lifecycle. So one of the things that I think is really interesting in that space is the idea of like executable controls, meaning you kind of like specification by example theory, or like BDD theory applied to the controls. So the idea being like, all your controls should be expressible in an executable way, a way that the software could understand whether or not it was in compliance with this rule, like through software, right? And so the really interesting outcome of that for organizations who have started kind of experimenting with that type of control is that then they can start actually like they can create these kind of artificially intelligent systems, or things that are capable of analyzing text, and they can go look at your Jira story and say, okay, so like, where are you going to deploy this function? You didn't describe that yet in the ticket. What rules are you going to touch? What other systems are you going to touch? And then it can basically tell you all the compliance rules that will be required to be fulfilled based on the user story, right? It's kind of like left shifting compliance information. So you don't get to the end of your, whatever, your release train, if you're doing safe or whatever, don't do safe. But anyway, you get to the end and you get surprised, like, oh, I don't have any idea where all these compliance violations came from because nobody told me I was going to have to pass any of these things. So I think like there's definitely seems to me to be some need to think through the way that like how we apply constraints to this AI generated code. Like how will we, prompt engineer well enough to say like, you have to do these things or the code will be in violation of these compliance concerns. And maybe the other question ends up being like, how does AI change SDLC in these large organizations? Will compliance officers have to have a completely different way of thinking about how software is developed? Are we going to do AI generated code with code reviews? Like, there's so many interesting kind of things to play with there. I don't know. What other kind of ideas have you guys been playing with around making these artificially intelligent agents functional inside of a platform or the deployment?
Yeah, definitely. There are much more questions right now than we have answers. And he said code reviews. So who's going to review that code? Like, I would create an autonomous agent that would review the code that other autonomous agents have written.
Right.
But then, what kind of value is there in that?
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Frankly,
yeah.
One thing I think emotions are very, very critical. So basically, what I caught myself feeling when you were describing this automated compliance process is a lot of annoyance.
Yeah.
And basically, that's a very real danger there. That if you integrate too much of AI into your system, it becomes totally annoying and unusable, and people would just leave it. Yeah. And basically, anybody who works with computers have cursed at computers multiple times in their career, right? Because computers are notoriously dumb, right?
Yeah.
And that's maybe a good thing, but not always. Yeah. Now, when we've all been playing with the ChatGPT and systems of the kind, and they're intelligent but still dumb, right?
Yeah.
Because there is no personality there, and that's very, very easy to feel, right? And that what makes me annoyed. So basically, as a human, I want to feel understood. Now, understanding one another isn't easy for two humans.
Yeah.
So when we expect the machine to understand us, let's teach one another to understand one another, and then maybe at a certain point we can start talking about making machines understand what we want them to do.
Yeah.
Folks are being very skeptical on different forums on the internet, like saying, okay, yeah, the machines are going to write the code, but then the end user needs to describe what they want them to do. Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time with it, right? Like, I have a hard time thinking through it to some extent, because sometimes I get pissy about it and want to be like, this is all dumb. And other times I'm like, how far away is prompt engineering? I'm just going to stick with that term because I've heard people use it, like, trying to code by creating the right level of prompts and inspecting the code that comes out, blah, blah, blah. I know it's not as anywhere near as controllable right now. Like, you can't control it to the same extent that you could, if you were programming Java, right? Like Java, you've got a significantly large amount of control over it, but Java itself is like a set of abstractions on top of bytecode, right? Like, the whole point of it was to move the abstraction layer up and make what we were reasoning about at a different level than managing memory and things like this. So I do wonder, to some extent, at what point do people just go, oh, ChatGPT is just another computer programming language. It's just another interface, another IDE. And am I just an old, get off my lawn person because I want to, type in methods and types and stuff like that? I don't want to describe something to some weird chatbot. I don't know. I have a hard time thinking through that right now.
I think there's a lot of potential for AI. Again, what Copilot is doing, basically, it's evolving the code generators that we used to have, right? So basically, if I have something that can generate the boilerplate for me, wow.
Yeah, totally.
That's already great. But on the other hand, I don't really want somebody to take the creative part of creating software away, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I don't even think we want this because there is no value in that. And again, I'll take the parallel with music. So basically, when you're synthesizing sounds, you can create sounds that you can't really create in real life, right? And that comes from experimentation. So I'll add that filter, and I'll try to combine a sine wave and a saw wave, and then maybe add some kind of a modulation on top of that, and then suddenly I realize, wow, that's a great sound I just received. And then I learn what the right combination is, and then I start using that in production in the future. So basically, I think that's what our interaction with the AI is going to look like in the coding, right?
Yeah.
Right now, it's pretty dumb. Like, it can only do what it's taught to do, and then sometimes it starts combining stuff, and then it gets mostly spits out code that's not usable, not workable.
Yeah.
So I guess at a certain point, we'll get to the point where it spits out code that's unexpected and usable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so when we get to that point, we'll learn what the prompts are to make it use that, and I suppose we'll start using those prompts.
Yeah. So it's like you described a really good Scrum team, though, right? Like they spit out unexpected but very usable code occasionally. Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I think it's an interesting set of problems to think through, and like seems like one of the things that tends to make me think about in relationship to my experience through the years is like there was a significant movement for like generative coding systems, right? So like specifically like EJB and all these other kind of Corba and these other kind of like required multiple levels of like pipe laying that were like mind-numbingly boring and could be highly automated, at least for initial production, right? Like you can spit the templates out, you get them all in place, but of course anybody who worked with those things knew that that helped you go from green field to established. But as soon as you had to change anything, you didn't want to start from the beginning and regenerate everything. So it was like there was an illusion that you were reducing the amount of work, but you're only reducing the amount of work in a particular kind of time point in the cycle. So again, if the AI is just another version of generative, but not capable of maintaining and rationalizing about the software that it kind of is developing, which I don't think it can currently do, it's just like going to make more code to manage. And then people will still have to manage and update and evolve kind of the things that we've talked about already with platform. And I'm not sure that is going to be, I don't know how helpful that particular part will be. And like there was another huge movement. I don't know if you remember this, but it was like everybody got into unit testing and everybody got into like Sonar and all these other kind of unit test coverage mechanisms.
Code scanning.
And then people, of course, came up with, it's too hard for you to get your code coverage up. Here's an automated unit testing system. It will, use reflection to inspect your API. It will inject things for you. And all that was doing is like, pouring cement all over your code, right? Like it made it impossible to move anything because every time you changed anything in the code, it broke all the tests. So I don't know. Automation's not, it's like selective or appropriate use of automation is clearly highly valuable, but like, are we getting better at selecting where the automation should live? I guess is maybe my question. I don't know.
Well, I guess with time we are, but the trouble is they're very creative. I know if it's trouble, but yes, we are very creative. So we're always looking for new ways of using automation, and many of those just quite naturally won't work. And many of those, much of that creativity is, of course, driven by our desire to earn a few bucks.
Yeah.
So basically, you get sold on systems they don't really bring you value at the end of the day. Again, I'm not trying to be too skeptical here, and it may sound like I'm going back to that old fart notion of saying people are dumb and they'll continue making the same mistakes. People are wonderful and they'll continue making the same mistakes, because it's through mistakes and through errors how we learn and how we in the end create something new. So that's fine. I think automation is wonderful of itself, right? So all of the efforts to make our work more productive, more enjoyable. Again, and by the way, that's one of the things that when we're talking about platforms, like, so we all basically, if we're consultants, if we're building platforms, if we're building platformy products, we first of all, of course, we're trying to sell this, to sell the idea. I started this interview with the sales pitch. So basically, the platform is your competitive advantage. Okay. But then it goes back to that discussion about developer experience and developer productivity. Again, it's also a sales pitch, right? So basically what we're saying here to the business owner, we're going to make a developer more productive so you can squeeze more bucks out of their day-to-day work, right? But by the end of the day, one thing that maybe we're missing when looking at platforms is that there are humans at the edges. And if you don't build a platform that humans can enjoy using, that platform will fail. Inevitably, right? So a platform should serve humans in the end. Like any product, any information system serves humans. If it doesn't serve humans, it will fail. I think there was also discussion on one of your episodes about, if everything, is operated by AI, there is no value creation in the end, because the value is only created by humans in the end.
That's right.
Okay, so the same with platform. If humans are not enjoying the platform, if humans are not happier because they're using the platform, then the platform will fail. The humans will resist, and in the end, will kill all the robots.
One of my favorite things that Kevin Barry used to say to me all the time was, we want to talk a lot about socio-technical systems, where there's kind of some sort of balance between the social system, the technical system, or that those are viewed as two parts of a whole, not as two separate systems that are somehow just interacting and that you can modify one without modifying the other, stuff like that. And one of the things he would say to me all the time was, the problem is we keep on seeing too many techno-social systems. And what he meant by that was we see too many places in which humans are serving the technology instead of technology serving the humans, right? That especially operators and people who work in those kind of like ongoing relationships with technical systems end up, care and feeding of the technology is what they're expected to do it all the time. And there's some sort of misbalance there in a lot of organizations, something that we need to be more careful about, be more thoughtful about, I think. So I definitely see that kind of like, and there's another great William W.B. Arthur, who's like a writer on kind of like natural evolution in technology. Also has this like same really interesting idea, which is like when you create a technical system, you often end up having small defects that need to be patched, which means you expand the technical system to patch it, and this kind of grows and grows and grows. And what initially was small and simple and practical and useful and valuable becomes larger and larger and larger, and more humans are maintaining it. And at some point, there's like a tipping point where like humans are giving most of the value to the technical system that provides, significantly or relationally less value to the actual humans that are interacting with it. And we have to be careful of that. I mean, it's like a weird description of technical debt, but more like social or human debt or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And that's when we abandon that system and start building that new system that we're sure is going to be better than the previous one.
Absolutely.
But that's that's entropy. Like I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about that.
Yeah.
There are some universal laws of nature that you can't really fight, but there are ways to lessen the entropy, and that's usually by allowing external influences.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
So a closed system always develops entropy, but the more you open it up, the less the entropy influences.
Yeah, and I think I also like to go back to call back a little bit to the earlier part of the conversation about everybody has a platform. There's also just like a lot of those platforms by omission end up being like cancerous growths, right? It's like we know we have too much of the same functionality spread everywhere, but we can't figure out how to stop funding it. So it's just going to keep growing and bubbling and so yeah, it's outside pressure, like being responsive, but it's also like autophagy is the term, like allowing some of these systems to die so that they can be replaced by more appropriate, more contemporary versions of themselves, as opposed to being put on artificial life support for forever and ever and ever, because we haven't thought about common platform concerns, appropriate isolation, appropriate automate, all these types of things. And so, you end up with tons of pets, very few cattle type stuff. So I don't know.
Definitely. And that's also because, platform engineering is such a young discipline. Basically, what we're now seeing is this totally new discipline coming to life. And the reason why most companies have such hard time building these internal platforms is it's so young. Like the platform teams that we're building, they're inexperienced with that.
Yep. They
know how to use, Terraform or the cloud API or how to build CI/CD pipeline. They have no idea what the platform design principles are.
Yep.
Like, I found myself thinking about that only maybe a year ago. Right?
Yeah.
So even though I've been building something like that, I've been building those platforms by omission, probably for the most part of my career.
Yep. I do think like one of the things, to point at that, I like, I get conflicted, right? I both want to say to people like DevOps people like yourself have been building platforms, and that platforms have been one of the things that we've been talking about for years. Like you pointed at the SRE book, you can go back and look at the WebOps book. There's like lots of people who talk about the idea that you need to have a platform or things that seem to have a lot of the same qualities of platforms, right? So like that's one side of my conflicted brain. The other side of my conflicted brain is not wanting to reduce the uncertainty about what this thing is. Like that there's some value in saying we don't know exactly what the principles are yet. We don't, and part of my version of that is that this is why I could get freaked out sometimes about the platform as a product metaphor, because I'm like, no, but platforms are definitely different than products. Why are we trying to reduce this emerging set of practice, design theory, engineering to some other thing that already exists? I mean, besides the fact that I don't think most people do product engineering particularly well either for product management, but like it seems to me like it'd be better to say no, this is something that, as you've pointed to, is an evolving field of practices. It may be true that many people have been building these things in all these organizations, but it's now becoming like a thing that we're talking about and trying to figure out as a larger community outside of individual organizations, with some hope, I think, that we're going to arrive at some principles, some ideas, some ways of thinking about how to design these things better. Yeah.
Definitely. And by then, the AI assisted coding will evolve, and we'll need to come up with something totally new. And that again takes us back to the idea: if you want to build a good platform, build it as open as possible, because and that's maybe one of the main differences between a product and a platform, right? So a product should satisfy a very certain set of needs, and that's what makes it a good product. It fits the exact needs that we have right now. But the platform is there for builders, and it should be open enough to allow to be modified whenever the needs change.
Cool. Anton, it's been great talking. Thank you. You've been very generous with your time today. Can you give the audience three takeaways? What are the three things you think they should take away from the conversation or from your observations about kind of platform engineering and design in general?
Yeah, right. There's been we've talked a lot of theory, but again, the main point of my focus is software engineering in large organizations. So one of the first things is, first of all, start looking at creating an IDP. Again, not an internal developer portal, but rather an internal delivery platform. Right. So in order to do that, the second thing is understand your user personas, right? So understand who the users are, understand that it's a platform that's made for humans. And it's by starting with understanding the way they currently work, understanding their problems, their hardships, their annoyances, and also what makes them happy is how you actually go to building great platform. And the last thing, I think, play long games. Yeah. So understand that platform that you're building right now, realize that you'll have to maintain it in the long run. So for that, again, my opinion is you should look at something that has a large community. Right. And again, we're learning this new discipline as a community. We're evolving it as a community of practitioners. And I think that's where you need to look when you start building something like that.
Yeah, cool. And just to pick on the thread one more time, the personas you were talking about, I love that you said there's a build and there's a run, right? It's not just this entirely developer centric set of personas. These platforms have multiple personas that we need to get to have a better understanding of. And to my mind, it's like platforms have to be desirable, feasible, technically feasible, economically viable for product owners and product managers. They need to understand the value of it. For developers, for operators, for architects, and even for business leaders who need to understand why they're investing in these things. Why, how should I be shaping my budgets differently? How would investing in this look? What are the strategic investment, ways of looking at this? How should I reorg? How should I restructure my organization around these things? So there's, this is a broad conversation to me that, again, I don't want to see reduced to simply, we need better developer experience and then everything's going to get great. But that's just me.
I definitely totally agree. We've been talking exactly about that. A good platform benefits everyone in the organization, and it's by design, but also by outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anton, how can people either get in touch with you or support your work or find you on the internet? What should people do if they want to hang out with you more?
So yeah, I'll be happy if folks follow me on Twitter. It's Anton Weiss, like you see it on the screen, but without the space, right? Cool. And also, I guess that's the best way. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, and everything I write, and I also have a podcast, by the way, called DevOps Shorts. And I haven't released an episode in a while. I'd like to have you, Jabe, on the podcast. Yeah, it's only 15 minutes long, so it's a lot of fun, very dynamic.
Cool.
So go check that out. And yeah, mostly Twitter. I'll announce everything, and there will be a few announcements very soon, I hope, related to platform engineering and IDPs very soon.
Excellent. So Anton, you'll send me some links. I'll put them in the description down below if people want to get in touch with you. It's great to have you. I look forward to being a guest on your thing. That'd be great. I'd love to do that. And I hope to see you around real soon.
Yeah, sure. Same here. Thanks, Jabe.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.